Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christine Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Matt. Welcome to Green Profit Academy Pros podcast.
Steve, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be on here.
So we have a special guest, Matt Thibeau, who owns Savant Marketing up in Canada, and he helps contractors build and grow their businesses in a really impactful way. And we're going to get into the marketing a little bit later, but one of the things I brought Matt on this show for was to share his entrepreneurial journey. And whether you're doing marketing or lawn care or landscape, painting, or any kind of contracting or any business for that matter, there's always a certain amount of energy and uncertainty that surrounds it. And so we're going to kind of unpack that for Matt. And so he's going to be vulnerable. He's going to be sharing. And I really appreciate that.
Let's get into it.
All right, Matt. So you're going to start a business, right? You started a business, but what led up to you saying that, or that moment saying, hey, I want to go do this. I want to start this business.
Yeah, I think like any entrepreneur, like from a really young age, there were kind of like the warning signs of being an entrepreneur. I'm actually the only entrepreneur in my family. I wasn't like my dad wasn't an entrepreneur. I had no influence of that whatsoever. But just growing up, I was always starting like these little businesses, maybe more of like a side hustle type thing. And I remember like my parents were always like a little bit concerned about it because they were always like, why don't you just go get a job and like do these things? Like, why are you always they would call it like kind of like scheming, and doing these things. And even I didn't really understand it, but I was kind of just like, oh, that's an opportunity. Like that would be kind of fun to do that. It was just fun for me. And that continued for like a while up until I would say I reached the point of when your high school is up and it's kind of like decision-making time now where it's like, hey, do you go to university? Are you going to go get a job? Like, what are you going to do? And my mom never went to university. And that was something that was really important to her, education. So my parents both said, Matt, you're going to university and you're going to pay for it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess I'm going to do this, And so I went to university, and I went to university for communications and media, which is kind of marketing, basically. Because I always knew that I was interested in marketing to some degree. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. So I went through school, and during going through school, I was introduced to my dad's friend, Steve. And I never met a millionaire before. I never met an entrepreneur before. And my dad and I would go on these mountain bike trips, and Steve was also a mountain biker. And so he introduced me to Steve. And that was the first time in my life that I was ever exposed to an entrepreneur where something about him was different, just the way he thought. Obviously, he had nice things. And I remember like candidly at one moment when we were kind of talking, we were sitting down or something, and I straight up just asked him, I said, what do you do? Like, what do you actually do for a living? And he was like, oh, I'm a marketing consultant. I work with industrial type businesses and I help them grow and we do strategy and blah, blah, blah. And I remember just like when he told me that, I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, that sounds really cool. So I had the audacity where I just straight up asked him, I just said, can I work for you? Like, I want to be around you and just work for you. And I pretty much told him, I said, I'll work for free. Like, I just want to learn from you and help you and just be in that environment. So that's what I did. And that was kind of the start of my entrepreneurial journey, learning from a mentor and just being around his energy and learning. And, he would show me courses and teach me about marketing, and I would write ads, and just there was so much learning involved with it. But I think the best part was just being able to have a model of looking at and being like, oh, like this is what an entrepreneur is.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of your first foray in that, you had a successful mentor right away to kind of emulate, and also immediately right in your kind of like niche, what you did, right? What you wanted to do, what you were attracted to doing, what you went to school for. So I think it's very common. Interestingly, I went to a university, and one of the kind of main themes about the university was first generation college students. So most of the people, I went way back in the 80s. So most of the people that were there, they were the first people in their family to go to college.
Wow.
So, it was either blue collar or, middle management kids coming from that background. So, I understand a lot of it was like different thinking, like, our parents today, parents like go to everything at the colleges and travel with the kids. And back then it was like, you drove yourself to college. Your parents didn't even see you there, or they drove up and kind of like put your bags out the curb. So they didn't know how involved to be in college. And I don't think that was a thing then. So, being the first generation college, right, it's a different mindset. And then my family was full of entrepreneurs. So small business people, even my grandfather had a store, my uncle painted,
Wow.
my uncle had a tree business. And so I saw it all the time. So I was so excited. I knew that's what I was going to be doing. But for you, it's a different journey. And your parents were probably going, the scheming thing. Why are you trying to sell people stuff? And it was just kind of your creative lane. So you go to work for Steve. Love the name, by the way. And so you work for him. You're learning and you're kind of growing as an individual and also professionally. So what was the day you said, I'm going to start my business on this day going forward?
Yeah. So basically what happened was, so I was working for Steve for free, but I had all of this school debt. So I was like, hey, I need to pay this off as fast as possible, because in that moment in time, I knew as soon as I can get freedom from this debt, then that's when I can start my business. Like that was kind of my thinking process. So I was doing all this work for Steve, and it was in construction. So I was like, why don't I just go get a job working as a marketer for a construction business? So that's what I did. I found a 9-to-5 job. I was the only marketer like on their team, and they had no idea what they wanted me to do. They just said like, go do marketing. And so I was just kind of like left to my own devices. And so I kind of had this polarizing life, right? Like on the weekends and in the evenings and stuff, I was doing some work for Steve. And then during the day, I was doing this 9-to-5 job. And that only solidified basically in my mind that I want to be an entrepreneur, because I was just seeing like everything that was kind of, well, I want to do things this way in this business. And like you couldn't fix anything, you're kind of just like told what to do. Whereas with Steve, we were thinking creatively, and it was so much learning and blah, blah, blah. So finally, I reached the point where I remember on my computer doing like the last kind of transfer of the debt. It actually took me only about 7 months, I think, to pay it all off, because I was living at home. I had no expenses. So I paid it all off. And I remember as soon as it was paid off, I was like, I'm done. I'm good to go. And I think it was September 1st of 2016 was when I put in like my official resignation, to my job. And that was kind of the beginning of it all. And I remember, you read all these stories in these books of like, I quit my job, and then like a year later, I was a millionaire. That was not the case for me. So I quit my job. And I was expecting things to lift off a lot faster than I thought, So I asked Steve, I said, what would be the best kind of business to do? Because like, I know I want to do marketing, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, you should start an agency, because if you start an agency, you can do all the stuff that we're doing. You can hire people, you can create systems, and you can do it for the construction industry. So that's what I went out to do. And quite frankly, my first year was just absolutely terrible. I think I was doing like cold calls. I was trying like 20, 30 cold calls a day, which honestly is not that much. But for me, just starting, I had no idea about sales. Didn't really have much of a sales background even. Just had a passion for marketing and found it enjoyable. And the worst part about it was that I couldn't really go to Steve and ask him for advice anymore, because once I started my business, he kind of went off on another business, and he was kind of like, I don't really have like a lot of time for you anymore. Like I'm doing this other thing. So I was kind of left to my own devices. And so that was kind of when that mentorship ended, and I was forced to just kind of go out and do things on my own. And so, quite frankly, the first 3 years for me was a lot of that, was a lot of, cold calling. I remember doing walk-ins to just random storefronts of businesses and just being like, hey, like, what are you doing right now for your marketing? I'll show you right now, like, what you could do. And, and it had some successes, but I would say probably about 80% of failure. And during that 3 years was a really dark time, because there's this contrast of trying to be perceived as being professional and successful, and you want people to believe in you and blah blah blah. But then I'm living at home. I didn't really have any money. Like, you're still trying to figure everything out. And so I would say the first 3 years for me was really like trying to get that altitude, and I would get a little bit of success and then it would fall down, and then I would try again and get a little bit of success and then fall down. So it was very much, it felt like, just up and down, up and down, up and down for quite a while.
Yeah, it's that nonlinear dynamic chaos, right? It's not a straight line, or the graph doesn't go, this perfectly percentage growth every year. So thank you for sharing that, because one of the things I think a lot of people have this perception of, the day you start your business, you're instantly a millionaire, and you're, all the answers, and you're pretty infallible and everything. But it's really just starting on the journey of vulnerability and learning things that we never even thought could happen or were possible. And so, your first 3 years were kind of a tough period. It's interesting because we just had a guest on recently, Steve White from Second Nature Lawn Care, and he also shared that those first 3 years were really the most difficult time. And I have a thing I call the 1,000-day theory. So most things take about 1,000 days from when we start them to where they really start to pick up momentum. Where they're implemented, we adjust it, we get it dialed in. It's about 1,000 days. And, I have case after case where that seems to be true. And that's about 3 years. It's 3 years, a little more than that. But that 1,000 days is about what it takes. So, just giving us a little bit of grace and a little bit of time to develop ourselves. And, you probably thought one thing and then something else happened. And these people are going to be so excited I can help them grow their business. And they're not excited. So, it's interesting. So what was one or two main takeaways from those first 3 years that you would share?
I would say the first main takeaway for those first couple of years was just even though I was failing a lot, every time I would fail, I would make a mental note and be like, okay, that doesn't work. And I'd be like, not doing that again. And then I would try something else. That doesn't work. Kind of like Thomas, I think it was like Thomas Edison or whatever, found 1,000 ways that it didn't work. It was kind of that,
Right.
Where I was like, okay, if I say this in a cold call, people are going to be a little bit more interested. But if I say, hey, I'm a marketing company, then they're going to not be so interested, So I would lead with the value and say, hey, we can, what kind of jobs or something are you looking for? I just figured out how to lead with value. And then I'd be like, okay, that works. This doesn't work. And it took way longer than I thought. But I would say the first thing was just kind of realizing what doesn't work. Okay, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. And just crossing it off the list. And then the second thing I would say, what I really learned is that people appreciate when you're just vulnerable and you're not trying to fake it, especially in the beginning. So what I realized, what really learned is if I was just brutally honest with people and I would just say, listen, I'm a new company, but that's actually an advantage to you, because if you're my only client or bigger client that I have, I'm going to put all of my energy into you. Anytime you call, I'll pick up, blah, blah, blah. And so that was kind of what I led with a little bit more vulnerability of being honest and being like, this is where I'm at, but I know I can help you. And I think that was where people really appreciated the honesty, or they were like, wow, okay, at least he's being straight up.
Yeah, that's some good shares. Being authentic and honest about what you know, what you can do, what you can provide, and, not learning hey, that didn't work. Hey, this worked. Let's not do that again. One of the things that I keep hearing is it took longer than you thought. It took longer than I thought. And that is very common to entrepreneurs and business people. We want things to happen much quicker. And I kind of call it my runway. Even when I share stuff with my team, my runway is very short. And in my thinking, like, oh, shouldn't take too long. But in reality, it's a runway plus a couple bridges and another runway. Because I'm just picturing the beginning and the outcome that I want. I kind of miss all of the minutia in between all the steps. So, it's very interesting that that's so common. So if you're listening to this and things aren't happening as fast as you want them, just realize that's the deal. Everything takes longer than we wanted or thought it was going to take, and it's supposed to, because, think of all the things that you learned over those 3 years. If it had happened really quick and easily, what would you have missed, right? What lessons would you have lost? So.
Yeah, and I can't remember who it was who told me somewhere along that journey, but they said, Matt, just commit to 10 years in your business.
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
So we're talking about how long it takes to do things and why we need to be patient with learning. So after year 3, you're in how long have you been in business for, Matt?
7 years.
7 years. So bring me from year 3 to year 7 now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So kind of my first big breakthrough was we had a landscaper that it was a referral to us, and he was focusing in on patios. And I've done enough campaigns at that point to have an idea of what would work, what wouldn't work. And we actually worked with some clients outside of construction. So I got some perspective of like what works and what doesn't work outside as well. But we had this landscaper come to us and he really wanted patios. And he didn't have a huge budget actually at the time at all. I think it was only like $700 a month or something like that for ad spend, maybe even a little bit less. But what happened was we set up the campaign for him, and he actually had some really good pictures and he had some good testimonials. So we set up a campaign for him. And I remember after the first month, we did like a check-in call. And I was like, so like, how did those leads go? Because it was working. And he was like, yeah, man, things are pretty good. Like, I think we made about $10,000 in profit. I landed like 2 or 3 jobs, blah, blah, blah. And I remember when he said that, because I wasn't charging much at all back in the day. But I remember when he said that, I was like $10,000 in profit in the first month. And I was like, there's something here. Like, I think I just kind of stumbled on something. And that was then when I was like, okay, I can turn this into a case study now. And I think that I can start like showing other landscapers and other contractors this. And that was kind of the start of like contractor marketing and really moving towards doing these ads for contractors. Because before I was just experimenting with everything like emails and ads, and I was doing pretty much anything you could do. And so that was really like the aha moment. And then, the first big step was like, okay, now I have a system that works and I know who I need to like, who this is for the solution for. the next step now is like, how do I actually start offloading some of my work? Because my next biggest problem was that like I was doing everything, a lot of the like repeatable stuff, a lot of the paperwork, like all the selling, everything, all the delivery. So the first thing that I remember like that I was like, okay, I need help with this was my bookkeeping and like anything to do with that, because I still to this day, I'm like awful at that, very bad at that. Anything to do with like tracking invoices and numbers and blah, 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 all that. So that was the first person that I hired. They're hourly and, they would help me out with some of my books. And then it just snowballed from there. And I would say like the first real breakthrough was when I hired a VA. And that VA, the reason that I hired them, I remember one night was I was sitting on my couch, and for our clients, we would like respond to all of the reviews that they get, and we respond to them and say, hey, like, thanks for leaving this great review. And I remember back in the day, every night I would sit on the couch while watching TV and just respond to every single client review and just be like, hey, thanks a lot for, leaving this great review, blah, blah. And it dawned on me in one moment, I was like, what if I just hired someone to just do this for me? Like, why do I have to do this? And that was the VA. That was like where I was like, hey, like, can you do this? And then I started realizing other things like that I'm doing every day, like sending off, welcome emails and blah, blah, blah to new clients and these kind of things. And so that was the beginning of when I really started to be like, I need to systemize this. And then I stumbled upon the book E-Myth, and that kind of like rolled into, a lot of other systemization.
Right. So you're sitting on the couch, answering back on reviews that people had sent for your clients. Yeah. So you got help with the bookkeeping first. And, I've always had a bookkeeper. Even when I started my business, I had a remote invoicing service called Blue Jay Invoicing. And I would do it over the phone. And we would meet twice a week, Tuesday and Fridays. And because I'm not a bookkeeper and I had another bookkeeping service, that's not my deal, keeping track of all the little details. So that was a big help, right? Because healthy books, one of the things that I really realized when we started Green Profit Academy and working with clients was, I would say 80% of people's books are not properly clean, aligned correctly. So it's really difficult to kind of help them initially until we get a good, clean set of books. Like they'll have so what's not clean, right? So having a negative liability on your balance sheet, or negative assets, negative asset would be a liability. Liability is something you owe, so you can't have a negative liability because then it would be an asset. So just things like that. And the books are just not categorized correctly and everything. So having books that are, really clean help to make really good decisions. But then the VA was another big step for you, taking stuff off your plate and answering things and getting stuff done, emails, welcome emails and stuff like that. So it lets you focus more on sales and developing the creative.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, and then the next kind of big step I would say is just having a real sales process. Like at a certain point, I realized that if I'm going to do the same thing every time, like bring a customer client through like this process, it should be airtight. Like it should be good. I should actually like preemptively think about it. So that was when I started to invest in a lot of sales training and just figure that out, like understand like, okay, from like stranger to warming them up to like introduction to blah, blah, blah. Right. And just being able to understand that whole process. That was like very transformational for me too. I think that every entrepreneur should go through some kind of sales training program just so you have an idea of like how to convey value, how to put together proper systems, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, a good sales system is really important. And, one of the biggest parts of a sales system is the follow-up. Sometimes people just give up when they hear no the first time, or the people don't buy the first time they work with them. Sometimes people need to kind of ruminate on what they have, the information. Then when that pain point comes up again, they're like, oh yeah, they said they could help me with that. The challenge shows up. They're like, oh yeah, I can get some help with that. So, it's selling is really follow up and having that real process, the steps and, revisiting with people it's interesting. I saw something that only about 3% of our actual available market is ready to buy at any one time.
Yeah.
So out of 100 people that could really use our products, only 3% are ready to buy at right now. There's 97% that you have to keep kind of educating and everything. I remember there was a consultant I worked with for about 20 years, but I had been reading his material for like 7 or 8 years before I even had a conversation with him. So it's definitely a long game. When the pain got great enough is when I reached out and hired him. But it definitely is a long game. I think one of the fantasies is we're going to put out an ad or a Facebook post, and even for lawn care, right? We're going to run this one ad on Google pay-per-clicks, and all of a sudden we're going to start getting all this work, and that's just not a reality. So you hired the VA, you have bookkeeper, and now you started building a team. I saw some pictures of your team. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, most businesses, the thing that holds them back from building a team is being able to have their lead gen and sales process in place, right? Because once you have enough leads coming in and you have a system for that and you have sales pretty dialed in, what your next problem is going to be is like, I can't fulfill all this work. So I got to that point where I was like, okay, like I can't really fulfill this work. And so the next step for me was I had a friend that I grew up with since I was like 15, and super bright guy. And we would always talk about business ideas and such. And I noticed that like around that time, he started doing some e-commerce and like some experiments with marketing, and just like he was bouncing ideas off of me. And at that time, then I was like, well, hey, man, like I have some extra work that I can't really take on anymore. Maybe you could help me out with like building out some ads and doing this kind of stuff. So I hired him part time. And then that was he was working for me part time, and then he was doing his job on the on part time as well. And then finally, it came to the point where things were growing, and there was more and more workload getting to him. And then at that point, he actually asked me like, "Hey, man, like, would it be okay if I went full time with you?" And then that was when I was like, you know what? I think we could make it happen. So then put him on payroll, went full time with me. And that was a pretty scary step, because when someone's on payroll, it's different when someone's a contractor, right? Where they're just invoicing you. And I think in the States, you guys have like a specific word for it. Like, we don't have that here, but when he went full time with me and he was on payroll, that was a bit of a mindset shift for me, where I was like, okay, this money's coming out every single month. And that was really like the start of me building, a team, like a pretty solid team. So now we have, appointment setter, we have Favreau, who's a full-time marketer, and then we have a success manager, and then we also have my VA. So, it's like we're a small team, but it's a team. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, 7 years in business and you have this team. So you're seeing growth, you're helping clients, and no, that's awesome. So what has been your biggest surprise? So you go from entrepreneur, you're running it by yourself, then you get your VA, your bookkeeper. Now you have a sales process, you have a salesperson, a success, and then you have these other team members. So what's been your biggest lesson from building a team?
It's really good. I would say that my biggest lesson with building a team is that you can only systemize things to a certain level. So, like, you can build out SOPs, standard operating procedures. Like, you can SOP things out to a certain point, but there is a level of where you need to actually train someone so that they can have autonomy to be able to make decisions on their own. Because if you just have a team of people who are constantly just following only systems, then whenever anything outside of that system occurs, or there's some kind of nuance or something like that, they don't know what to do. So that's where I started realizing that training of how to actually think so you can make decisions autonomously based off of a thinking framework, that for me has been like the biggest challenge, I would say, is realizing that you can't just run a business off of like SOPs alone. You need to actually train people on how to actually have a model of thinking.
A model of thinking. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
So understanding what the company mission is and what the mission they're serving is, purpose of the company,
Hmm.
the vision and the values. We call it mutable laws. It's really a guiding kind of factor in decision making. And are we serving the mission, vision, purpose, and immutable laws? That helps people make decisions like that. But yeah, so 7 years in, you have this team. You're learning how to manage people, how to manage clients, cash flow. There's quite a bit of things that you're juggling. So you go from marketing guy to entrepreneur to now leader and developer and
Yeah.
trainer. It's a whole nother skill set that people are not always prepared for. But it sounds like you're really going through it really well. I'm sure you'll bump into a couple challenges that will be really good learning opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And I think, one of the things that I'm hearing just from your story is how much you line up with the people that I talk to in the lawn care landscape industry, very similar struggles, right? Like you're the only guy, maybe your wife's helping you out or your fiance is helping you out with the books. And then you hire a guy, then you hire maybe another person. Now you have to train them and teach them and make decisions and talk to customers and fix pumps and flat tires, all kinds of stuff. So you're at year 7. So what's the future look like for Matt Thibeau in Savant Marketing?
I think the future would be, so I'm a creative person and I do really enjoy doing content like this. I like creating content. I do like being the leader, but I'm a little bit more of a visionary. I think you're similar, probably. And so I would say the future for Savant Marketing would be just getting really great talent on our team to be able to get it to the point where maybe I could be in my zone of genius most of the time. I don't need it to be like all of the time, but maybe 80% of the time where I'm like constantly in my zone of genius. And for me, that would be creating great content and just like leading the company, thinking a little bit more strategically. That's like where I truly love to be. I'm not so much like a fantastic manager. I think I can do it, but I'm not like a great manager. So I think getting to the point where we have some great management in place, and just like really great talent. A lot of the people that I look up to today, I go to conferences and try and learn from some of the experts in like this industry, and they just say, your people are like number one, like treat your people really great, have fantastic talent. Yeah, you want to have like all these systems and stuff, but really if you have great people, then that's going to really help the culture and make like a well-oiled machine, that's running without you. So I would say that that's the vision. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I am more visionary. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need implementers, and I kind of stay out of their way, right? Give them the mission, vision, purpose, immutable laws, goals, and help support them with resources, and then stay out of their way. All right. So let's get to Savant Marketing. Like, share one really nice success story you've had working with a client.
Yeah. I would say one that we are really proud of is, so we have a local client here, and he's a fencing contractor. And before working with us, he was dabbling a little bit with marketing. So he was doing like a little bit of SEO, just like kind of here and there, door hangers and such, but never had like a real system in place for marketing. And we actually did a lot of work with his brother earlier. If you go on our website, like he's one of the testimonials on there. So he referred him to us. And when he came to us, he was like, I don't really know much about marketing, but I've got this business. I think he was doing about $1 million a year with his fencing company. And he was saying, if we could get to 1.6 this year, that would be like a great goal. I would love to be able to do that. And so I asked him, I said, out of all the fencing that you're doing, what for you is your primary profit maker? That's what we like to focus on. He was saying, for us, PVC fences, we have a great supplier for that. We make a great profit on that. I enjoy doing it. It's easy to warranty. It lasts, blah, blah, blah. So he was like, I'd really like to focus on that. So we built this whole campaign based around PVC fencing. And we implemented that for the whole year. So we did from in Ottawa, Canada, we get snow pretty much from like November until like March, April, 10th thing. So we launched around April, and then we ran it all the way up to November. And within that time frame, we did $575,000 in sales directly from the campaign.
Wow.
From the leads and everything. It was a really cool campaign because not only was the lead flow on point, but we were working with him and his sales systems were great. Like he was the one who was taking a lot of the calls. He was only like completely on sales. And then he had a great CRM. All his follow-up was really great. So that's one that like hopefully soon we'll have the testimonial on the site and he'll talk a little bit more about it. But that was an example of like something that we're really proud of where, someone who's kind of not really have the marketing systems in place, we implement it. And then it's like a great marriage between the sales systems and the marketing,
Right. Yeah, that's a great share. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. So he hit those goals, or pretty close to hitting those goals, plus what he was already doing. So for lawn care and landscape businesses, one of our biggest challenges is that, again, it's that short season, 8 months, 9 months, especially in the Northeast. Maybe the rest of the country, it's a little longer, Alabama, Florida. So there's a little bit maybe of a different approach depending on what we're trying to sell and everything. So what do you see is the biggest challenge for contractors in the mindset of marketing?
I would say the biggest challenge for a lot of contractors with the mindset of marketing would be that marketing is kind of like a faucet where it's like you turn it on when you need leads, you get the leads, and then you turn it off. Typically marketing is the easiest thing to turn off and on, right? Because like people will just call us up and be like, hey, like this marketing, like let's like pause it for now. We're super busy, blah, 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 this kind of thing. So I would say like the biggest challenge for a lot of contractors is that they kind of turn marketing on, they run it for a little bit, and then they turn it off. And depending based on your season, maybe sometimes it could make sense to do a little bit less marketing or a little bit more at a certain time. But in my opinion, you should never completely just turn it off. And I would say that that's kind of the biggest mindset challenge that we kind of have to work with clients to just be like, hey, like, you can turn off this aspect of it, but you should never stop marketing, period. Because marketing is a lot like farming. Like you want to be able to constantly be farming leads, working leads, and being able to bring in new leads at any given time. And so that's what I would say.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that too. And the other thing I would say is they think it's going to be quicker than it really takes, like, right? Because you have early adopters, late adopters, mid adopters. So not everybody who sees your ads and your marketing is an early adopter, and only 3% of the market is ready to buy right now, regardless of what you're selling. But yeah, that mindset of, right, they're just going to turn it on and off. So they turn it on and they expect these great results, and they shut it off, and it's a long game. Marketing is a long game. I typically, again, my 1,000 days. If I'm going to run a campaign, I'll typically look for 1,000 days. Otherwise, won't do it. And again, it's that early, mid, and late adopter in your market. So yes, that's a good mindset, right? About not being consistent with it for a long period of time.
And just to piggyback there, Steve, a little bit on your last, you were saying like there's a small market of people who are ready to go right now. I would say that that's also a little bit of a mindset misconception, is that a lot of contractors are like, well, I only want the serious leads. Like I only want the leads that are serious. I don't want any tire kickers. And so that term tire kickers, a lot of contractors will think like if they're on the phone with someone and they're not ready to go right now, oh, this guy's just a tire kicker type thing. Right. But it kind of goes back to your point, is that at a certain level, when you're doing advertising and getting all these leads, you can focus in on the smallest segment of leads, which are ready to go right now. But those are the most expensive leads that you can acquire. And there's the most competition for them because every contractor wants those people. So you can go after those people, but you can also start going after, the other 97% or whatever it is and start farming those leads and really warming them up, nurturing them, following up with them. And that is where marketing, you can really bring it to another level.
Yeah, and I think right. That's the next step of marketing. We call it our reject list, and it's people that have inquired at some point but didn't buy, and you can keep farming that and farming it, right? Because now all of a sudden you're the only person in the arena for that, and we do close a certain percentage of that reject list every year, but we just keep farming it. Yeah, and that's the thing I think about sales. People they give up too easy. They quit. No means, no now doesn't mean no forever.
Yeah.
There's a saying, for people who are religion, God's delay is not God's denial. And,
I love it.
And so sometimes we're just not ready for things. We don't know it, but somebody else knows it. So sometimes that person is just not ready right now for whatever reason. But they will be ready at some point. So that's why I think you have to keep in front of people on a really consistent basis for a long period of time. I was at an event the other night, and I was talking to someone, and he hired us just because he saw I have a nice white Mustang that's all, decaled up and everything. It's not a full wrap, but it's decaled. It looks really cool. He's like, when I came time to choose a lawn care company, I could not choose you because of that Mustang. I kept seeing it because we live in the same side of town, sort of.
Wow.
And so he's like, it was just like, but that was like, he's like, I saw it for 3 years before I even thought to call you. So it's just one of those things you have to keep showing up in your community. The other thing, especially for contractors, is that, with communities, we live in small communities. Basically, like we're in a tight area. It's not the World Wide Web, right? So we're not trying to get customers all over the country. We're pretty much in a geographical lock of some dimension. So being really present in that whole area and not just in a one-dimensional concept.
Yeah.
Is another thing, it's another level of marketing. And it's interesting when we used to run newspaper inserts, we used to run like 500,000 inserts. The first year, if we went to a new market, it was very dismal. The second year we would triple the return on that because now it's not the first time they've seen it.
Yeah.
So, just knowing that. And then the third year, it would be a little bit less than the second year. We always knew the first year would always be the worst because they had never seen us. They didn't know anything about us. So being patient with some of that is really important. The other part of marketing, I think that is almost never talked about or is like missed is, about a third, almost 40% of our marketing budget is to our existing and past clients. So nurturing those relationships because they're 7 times more likely to buy from us than a brand new person that's never heard of us. So really nurturing, that existing and past client list, showing up in front of them in education, not always pitching them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the most expensive thing you can do in business is acquiring a new customer, right? And so many contractors are focused on like new customer, new customer, new customer. A lot of the times what we do, like before we start with a client a campaign is we'll say, do you have a list of past prospects? Like, do you have someone that like a list of people that have, like you were saying, rejected a quote, or maybe you never fully delivered one, like they said they were interested, blah, blah, blah. And then we can do a reactivation campaign to them and just say like, hey, are you still interested in this? Because I would say a lot of contractors are kind of notorious for like, someone will say, can you follow up with me in like 2 months about this? I'm not ready. I need to think about it. And then they'll just kind of give a business card to them and say, yeah, call me when you're ready. But that moment usually doesn't come. So, you need to follow up and be proactive about it.
Yeah. Yeah. The follow-up is the key. Like it increases your sales by 50%. I was working with a company a few weeks ago and they wanted to increase all their marketing. We looked at their closing ratio and the sales, it was like 24%. So they had enough leads. It's just their sales process wasn't really thorough. And the big, I would say, hole in their game was the follow-up and the follow-through. And I kind of kid, when they would send an email quote and, what does an email quote sound like, right? It's just silence. So I was encouraging them to call up the people, emailing them while they're on the phone, and then open up the email while the people are on the phone and going over that, as opposed to just You send the email. You're hoping and praying that they got it, opened it amongst their other 150 emails they got that week. So that follow up is so huge in all marketing and in sales.
100%.
Yeah, it's where the next level is. So we're improving their sales system and their follow up. So there's like people that are really hunters. They're like hunting type of salespeople, and then there's like nurturing type of salespeople. So we have to identify who we are and who's on our team that can be the nurturer and who can be the hunter, because it's hard to get the hunter to slow down enough to be the nurturer.
That's really good. I like that.
So super important stuff. So Savant Marketing, you help, not only landscape lawn care companies. I know you do remodelers, roofers, any kind of contractor, because we're almost working with the same exact client.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, the campaign, unless there's like some types of niches maybe are a little bit less like beautification element to it. Like for example, like solar energy is very different than like lawn care, because like solar doesn't really look that great. It's more of the benefits that you get from like your house having like better energy efficiency, whereas lawn, it's like people are after that like kind of beautiful green looking lawn. But for the most part, we have a system that we tailor and customize for each client slightly, but the framework is pretty similar. So as long as they're residential, that's kind of the type of client that we like to work with. Commercial, our solutions can't really help a commercial contractor as much.
Right. So if you're selling to residential homeowners, and you want to build a really solid campaign, you can work with Matt and his team. We're going to put his link, his information in the show notes. So Matt, share your takeaway from today's podcast with me.
I would say that my takeaway, I was saying before, I've never had someone ask me about my entrepreneurial journey. So I would say my takeaway is just like, entrepreneurship isn't easy. Like we're constantly inundated with Facebook ads and all of this kind of propaganda that says like, you can start a business and it'll be successful in 6 months. But I think, it's important to recognize that entrepreneurship is a journey. Like it's a 10-year journey. That's someone told me a long time ago, I can't remember who it was, but they said, just commit to 10 years with your business. Just make that commitment and like pre-negotiate it in your mind. I'm going to stick to this business for 10 years and I'm going to give it a solid runway. And I think that it's inevitable you're going to be successful if you have that mindset.
Yes. So long-term thinking, you're going to have some bumps in the road. It's not going to be linear. And it's just a learning journey, really, the entrepreneurship. It takes a heart to really, it takes a warrior to kind of make that through that, a big heart and a lot of encouragement. And, our family supports us, our friends supports us, even if they don't understand really what and why we're doing it. Why would you go through that if you don't have to? It's just intrinsically who we are. We want that challenge. We want to climb that entrepreneurial mountain. So I appreciate that insight. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for joining us. And we'll have all his information. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.